for staying for this unscheduled finale, but when Will asked me if I'd have a conversation with him on stage about what Planet is doing, I immediately said yes, because if you don't know about it, it is one of the most exciting things that's going on right now. I'll ask Will in a second to explain exactly what his satellites do, which he does much better than I do. But you know, the quick journalistic 10-second summary is that about a decade or so ago, you founded this company, which is now the biggest collection of Earth imaging satellites in space, 200 or so. And the idea then was, amongst other things, to assist in sustainability, to provide the imaging that would help understand where the climate was going, and so forth. But in the last year, and I think you've been at DLD and explained this before, but in the last year, your images have been part of an extraordinary transformation in open source intelligence, which during the Ukraine war, and this follows on actually very much from the last panel, has been, I mean, literally transformational. The way that we understand what is going on in Ukraine in real time, the way the nature of the war has been fought, what we know about it, all of that has been transformed by social media, by Telegram, but also by the stuff that Will is doing. So there are, you know, few things that jaded journalists get genuinely excited about, but I think this stuff is really extraordinary. So, well, my first question is, can you just give to the hardy few who are still here an explanation of kind of what it is that your satellites do and what's been so transformational about it?
Yeah, great. Well, I'm glad you're excited about it. It's fun for journalists. I mean, it basically is a worldwide transparency maneuver overnight, and I think it does have some significant implications. Yeah, just a tiny bit of background on what's going on in space more broadly, and in satellites and Earth imaging satellites in particular. For those that don't know about this, it's kind of a unique situation where we have an explosion in the number of satellites. What's really going on, there's a bit of a lower cost of launch, which people have heard about because of SpaceX doing reusable rockets and other things. That's brought launch costs down about 4x compared with about 5 or 10 years ago. However, perhaps an even bigger part of the story, which is less seen, if you like, behind the scenes, is that it's more about the miniaturization of satellites. Because of the miniaturization of technology in general, satellites have got much smaller. They've gone from the size of a double-decker bus to, like, you know, the size of a fridge, or even something you can put in your hand the size of a loaf of bread. And in doing so, then you can launch hundreds of them, and in launching hundreds of them, you can do totally new capabilities that wasn't possible before. So this is a bit like and that's sort of changed the cost calculus of satellites by about 1,000x. So we've seen 1,000x in cost performance increases in satellites over the last 5 to 10 years. So that's what's dominating things. But the upshot of this is not the satellites or the rockets, it's the data. It's about data. So we're having these communication satellites like Starlink and OneWeb that are transporting data around the planet 10 times more than was happening before. And then Earth imaging data, which is what we do at Planet, is producing more than 10 times more information about the planet. In our case, we're imaging the whole Earth every day. So we have 200 satellites, they image the whole planet every day. So it's a bit like going to Google Maps and looking at the satellite layer, except it's not from a few years ago, it's from today. And it's also from yesterday, and we have an archive of 2,000 images on average for every point on the landmass of the Earth. So that's the sort of upshot, is all this data revolution. And what does that mean to have this data? Well, we're doing a variety of things, but we work with agricultural companies to improve crop yields, and that's 25% of the landmass of the Earth, so real-time information to help crops. We work with mapping companies like Google to update the maps that you see online. We work with governments. So, for example, we work with the German government on helping with floods, like the rapid response after floods, so disaster response. And then finally, in peace and security, we're shedding new light and transparency on these events as they happen around the planet. In general, it's bringing about transparency, which is helping us to, if you like, measure the things on the planet that we're trying to take care of.
Well, certainly, that's the one that, I mean, I knew about what you did before, but in the last year, we use your tools constantly, and we've been able to build, you know, interactive displays of how certain campaigns have gone in Ukraine, and you can see the satellite imagery, you know, you can see what's happened from one day to the next. It's extraordinarily powerful. Two questions. How much has the appetite from your customers changed in the last year? Do they now see different capabilities that they didn't see before?
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, Ukraine in particular has shed a light on what open source intelligence is doing for the world. I mean, I think in The Economist you said it was the coming out party for open source intelligence, right? Everyone's suddenly going, what's going on? I mean, and Ukraine has shown an incredible ability to leverage this for its advantage in that war. It's Telegram, it's social media, it's drones, it's satellite data, all merged together. It's not all the traditional intelligence, it's all this open source intelligence being pulled together, and it's quite a strategic advantage for the Ukraine government in that fight, and for the Ukraine people. It's having all sorts of impact, but yeah, I mean, it's very much the coming out party for open source intelligence in general, and the reception we're getting is very different. It's suddenly like, it went from, oh, nice little toys, that's interesting, but we're not interested, you know. But
so now
it's like the red carpet is being rolled out because we're like, we need that as well.
So is it, I mean, one of the things that really interests me is whether this is a very powerful vehicle for transparency and accountability in an era when, and so much of the conversation this morning was about worrying downsides of some of this technological innovation, and that you know, there would be greater power imbalances, and that actually this is bringing transparency. So talk me through what you know, I'm sure you think you're a force for good, but how impactful is this?
Well, I mean, I think it is democratizing to the point that you're just getting at, right? So some technology bends towards centralization. This bends towards decentralization because more people can get access to satellite data than used to be. It used to be the CIA had some satellites, the KGB had some satellites, and everyone else was blind, you know? And now everyone can go online and get satellite data. That's a very different way of looking at the world, and everyone's more empowered. Journalists can get access. I mean, where did you get your satellite data from 10 or 20 years ago? Nowhere. You didn't get it, right? Now you can. You can just order it from us, and we'll give it to you. And I think that is changing the game. I mean, yeah, so
does it make it, I mean, this starts getting very grandiloquent, but does it actually foster peace? I mean,
yeah.
and let me sort of, because that sounds so airy-fairy, but if you have more transparency, it makes it less likely that you have mistakes. Makes it less likely that there are military surprises. So one example was actually the build-up to the invasion. You guys,
right.
You could see the Russian build-up, and you could therefore corroborate what the security agencies were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think this is generally positive for peace and security. And by the way, in general, we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think the overall implications of our technology were good. We'd quit the company, you know. But for peace and security in particular, yeah, it brings, I mean, we're doing a few things in Ukraine as an example. We're helping operationally, like where and what's going on, and providing that to the Ukraine government and others. We're helping humanitarian organizations with their relief response. I mean, all the displaced people, there's 7 million displaced people within Ukraine, helping the medical supplies and things like that. And then we're helping with media to get access to that where appropriate, to see and give transparency. I think this is broadly having three implications for warfare. One is that transparency leads to accountability. So governments can't get away with stuff anymore. They used to think they could move troops and no one would notice. Well, you know, Putin in particular was like, oh, we're withdrawing just before the war, and we showed that they had built bridges between Belarus and Ukraine to stage the invasion. We were like, guys, there's these bridges, you know? Or think tanks lose our data to look for things like this. And just as another example, Putin claimed that they weren't targeting civilian assets, and the next day we published on the New York Times, the front page, here are 5 hospitals they bombed that day. So it's accountability. I mean, that may not have changed the action in that sense, but it's changed the public awareness about that. So accountability. And the second thing is it's leading to less mistakes. To this point, you're saying, generally, information in warfare is better on all sides. It's better for everyone to know what's going on. You have a fog of war in a war time frame. No one knows what's going on. It's better for everyone to know what's going on because you don't send that little set of tanks to a place where there's a bigger army just around the corner if you know that they're going to be there. And if you don't know whether they're there or not, you assume the worst, and then that's when miscalculations happen and bigger battles happen. So actually, this reduces collateral damage. And then the third implication is, I think, the coherence of society. society. So what we're seeing is everyone has access to this information. It used to be that governments had their sources of information, people on the ground, they had their own satellites, they were listening to radio channels or what have you, of military communications, and then they knew something, but they couldn't tell anyone about where they got that information from, because then that would upset their ability to get that. And so they were trying to convince the public, say, in Germany, that that's an important war, but they didn't have the data to back it up. Now, anyone can look at The Economist, like your article that you published yesterday on open source data and what it means, and see what's going on in Ukraine. And that helps because it brings the civil society along with the government. They're closer together. They have a smaller difference of information.
How do you think about, I mean, all of that's incredibly powerful, and how do you think about your role and your power in this? I mean, would you sell your information to anybody? What if the Russian government comes and says, actually, can we have access to these satellites? And the reason I ask is because you and I, not so long ago, had a conversation about Elon Musk and Starlink, where this very clearly, these calculuses are being made. You know, he's not giving access to the Starlink in occupied bits of Ukraine. So there is a sort of geopolitical power that you guys have, or companies have. How do you think about that?
Well, generally, we think that more access to information is better, and including on all sides. I mean, we do have a process for reviewing every client, the potential client that comes in. We look at them one by one and check. So, for example, check that they're not on sanction lists, and we don't provide it if that's the case. But also, we have an ethics committee that we've established that thinks through the consequences and tries to. We think it's a responsibility of technologists like ourselves to really think carefully about the role of our technology in society and steer it carefully. Generally, we will default to letting all people have it because we think that democracy, that transparency helps in all cases, but we will make exceptions to that. And so we have this ethics committee to review that. Look, I think that technology governance needs revamp. It's not doing well right now. But in the meantime, technology companies themselves are the regulatory force on themselves, which is not necessarily where you want it to be.
Which is a little concerning.
Absolutely.
Our timer has gone, so I have actually no idea how much longer I've got. But there's one more topic I wanted to get to, which was this topic that really, from which your company was born, which is the focus on sustainability. Because this is, again, a really important tool for thinking about, or for helping people with the climate transition, with planning things. What are like in the next 5 years, you've cracked OSINT, you've transformed that now. In the next 5 years, where are there going to be the real breakthroughs that Planet will be leading?
Well, I mean, it's the same fundamental theory of change, which is accountability. Transparency leads to accountability of action. And you know, you can't manage what you don't measure. So we're measuring everything so that people can manage and steward the planet better. You need data on a time scale of human change if you're going to intervene. So whether that's tracking and stopping deforestation, we'd have a big project to track deforestation across the 64 tropical belt countries, and we provide the data via the UN to those forestry ministries to stop illegal deforestation. And remarkably, we can stop it before the actual first tree goes down because we can detect an illegal logging road as they start putting that in before they chop down trees. So we alerting services for things like that. So that's the first step, but the extension of that is bringing natural systems into our economic system in general. So right now, at the end of the year, every country and every company has to write its financial books, you know? But it doesn't have to write its nature books. How is it impacting nature? What's its carbon bank balance, if you like? And everyone knows that we need to bring carbon into the economy and bring biodiversity into the economy and take into account the full value of that. But that means we have to have good measurement of it first, otherwise we can't do that. So that's where we hope to play, is provide those foundational tools. One example of that is just this Monday we bought a company called Salo, which is translating forest data, like I was just mentioning, monitoring deforestation, into carbon stocks of those trees. It uses the canopy height and the canopy structure in order to determine the amount of carbon in the tree. If you can do that systematically at scale, then you can provide a sort of carbon planetary variable. Here, every square, say, 100 by 100 meters, here's how much carbon there is. And then that can go on the bank balance, if you like, at the end of the year for every company. How is it removing or adding to tree count and therefore carbon, and they can put it onto their bank balance. So we're trying to produce a carbon planetary variable so that we can bring carbon into the economic system systematically and accurately, which is what is demanded.
And is that the area that most of your customers want your data for? Like, what are people mainly using it for?
I mentioned a few examples, like farmers using it to improve crop yields, implement sustainable agricultural practices, mapping companies, improving the maps you see online. It's all about real-time information that helps them make smarter decisions. We are trying to build up towards these, as I said, planetary variables so that we underpin more broad-scale change. So right now, it's the larger organizations that have access to our data. It is the Google or the Bayer, the large ag company here in Germany, or the German government, say, who access our data and make it useful, because they have teams of people with geospatial expertise who know how to build and leverage satellite data. But what in time I think we're trying to do, and with partners all around the world, lots of innovative startups, is make it easier to use, right? Build applications and services so that this ton of data, we get 4 million images every day. It's a lot of data, about 35 terabytes a day. Processing that is sort of really challenging for small organizations. But if we provide certain analytics, like just tell me how many trees were taken down in this period over this area, then you can just give me the latitude and longitude. I don't need to see the images. Then that makes it more easy for that NGO to act. And so we're going up the stack, so to speak, in the software sense, to enable smaller organizations to get access to this so that we can democratize it further.
And how much is that going to be eased by the subject of the whole of this morning of ChatGPT and its cousins? I mean, because part of it is understanding what you can do with your data. If you could then basically get ChatGPT to do that and say, what are the interesting patterns? What's changed overnight in Kherson province? I mean, can you?
Yeah, I think that's where it's going. I mean, and AI has been particularly good in the field of computer vision, which is taking pictures and figuring out what's in them. There's a cat or a dog in this video online. It's the same fundamental tools for figuring out, is that a tree or not? Is there a vessel there or not? Is that a fishing vessel or a illegal transshipment, or what is it? And yeah, so AI is bringing to bear the tools that enable smaller organizations to grapple with the kind of data sets that we're providing.
And does that make you an important part of the fight against deep fakes?
Well, I hope so. And I think that open source intelligence, that broader regime that we were talking about, drones and Telegram and WhatsApp and all this, is in potential able to fight a little bit this trend towards post-truth based on deep fakes and just this greater spread of misinformation. Because whilst that's going on, open source intelligence is triangulating things and making it harder to fake them. So I hope and think that there's a strategy where this becomes a bit of a counterbalance to the forces of misinformation on social media. Who knows who will actually win, but I mean, we should damn well try, because we need to keep the structure of society, democracy together is based on us having common and shared understanding of things.
I can't think of a better note to end on. We should damn well try, because democracy is based on a common understanding of shared, what was the last bit? I've now...
Just shared understanding.
Shared understanding. Well, I find this stuff absolutely fascinating. I really recommend you look at it and use it. And I guess I'm now closing things. So, thank you, Will. Thank you,
Thanks,
DLD.
DLD.
And thank you all.
Thanks, Zanny.
Thanks.